Welcome to Your Unapologetic Life, the podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Barkis, women's empowerment coach, speaker, and author. And this show is for the woman who's done crying herself to sleep. You're picking yourself up after the breakup or the divorce, and you're ready to figure out what this next chapter is going to look like. Not the one someone else wants for you, the one that's fully yours. Each episode is here to remind you you're not too late, you're not too much, and you're not alone. This is your comeback era, and I've got you. What I do know about you is boundaries. I think this is an awesome topic because a lot of people think it means saying no and putting people out and pushing people away. I would much rather have you explain what it is and why we should all be doing them as women, especially women who don't always put themselves first or say no. They're like, sure, I'd love to bring cupcakes tomorrow, even though they have 800 other things to do and they don't have time to go and bake fresh cupcakes for the kiddos' class the next day. Anyway, so will you introduce yourself? And if you would, just let us know what you do. And also, if you have a motto in life, I feel like you're a wise person. Mine is, if you don't try, you don't know. And that's why I probably do a lot of things that sometimes seem reckless to other people. And I figure if you don't try, you don't know. Take it away.
Thank you so much for having me, Morgan. It's a delight to be on your show.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to having you on mine as well soon. Yay, podcast swaps. Yeah. So for the listeners, my name is Mariya Graestone. I'm also known as Love Coach Mariya, and I've been coaching for over a decade now. And it's always really been around nurturing self-love, helping people break patterns of dysfunctional relationships. And really over like the past 2 years, I've been focusing a lot on developing healthy boundaries. And so now I am the boundaries coach, and my sort of distinct flavor on the boundaries scene is there's this common notion that's not really spoken explicitly, but it kind of implies that we have to sacrifice our compassion in order to become empowered and boundaried. And I'm over here being like, hey, actually, why don't we empower our compassion so that it can become big enough for ourselves as well as others? And then our boundaries also will become healthier than ever.
Mm-hmm. Wait, now tell me more about this transition from love coach to boundary coach.
I mean, I'm still Love Coach Mariya. You can find me on socials anywhere at Love Coach Mariya. By the way, my name is spelled a little different. It's Mariya.
So cool. Spell it like you say
it. Yep. So, still Love Coach Mariya. I'm still all about love, especially self-love. And I feel like that just translates to boundaries. I like the focus on it because I just keep encountering people who are very confused about it. It was a very confusing journey for me to figure out like what boundaries even are. I'm glad that it's like a growing trend. People are more and more interested in it, and there's more and more information on it. And yet a lot of the information, not all of it, but there's not a lot that's very helpful. Most of the information is not very helpful. My favorite punching bag is no is a complete sentence, which is true and just really not helpful, especially for like recovering people pleasers. It's just like, it's also sort of lacking any application in a wide variety of contexts. Like no period is often not really very applicable. So
I would love for you to tell me more about the people pleaser, dive into it a bit and give some examples. And I say this because I was at an event one afternoon and it was this lovely young woman and her mom. They apparently have a podcast, and then the daughter put together a book, and it was 365 days of some kind of like story and then a quote. It's called Dear Friend. Lovely concept. And the mom and other people in the room were sharing that they were recovering people pleasers. And I don't know that I ever have struggled with that. I've always been the person like, no, I don't like that, and I could just tell people that and be like, yeah, I don't want to be here right now. Stop the car. I'm going to get out. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I just don't want to be here anymore. Like I just was not worried about other folks a whole lot. And it comes up a lot, especially with women. And when they're sharing about things that they've been working on and working through and really learning how to put themselves first. So if you could say more about people pleasers, what is that? Give some examples, like, you're a people pleaser if, and then how that transitions into healthy boundaries and still, like you said, having compassion without being a people pleaser or sacrificing yourself. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense?
Yep. So there's the survival responses of fight or flight, and then we've tacked on freeze and fawn. And fawning is basically people pleasing. Fawning is like, I need everyone around me to be calm and okay so that I can feel safe. And it becomes such an ingrained habit that we don't even realize that we're doing it. We become these we're like a reflexive yes to almost any requester before we even, it's like, hey, can you, yeah, sure, what do you need? And it's like, you don't even hear it. You're just like, yeah. And then later you're like, oh man, I don't really know how I'm going to make that work. But you do, and you grind yourself down into nubs, and you just, I didn't even realize I was over giving, but people kept telling me that, like, I had one friend that was like, you're too accommodating. Like, he was concerned for me. And I had another friend was telling her about a difficult relationship. She's like, you need better boundaries. I was like, what is this? But the thing is, like, I didn't feel like I was doing or giving anything I didn't want to, but I had become so disconnected from my true yes. Like I said, we're kind of a reflexive yes, like, to the requester. It's more like the people that we're a yes to rather than what it is that they're asking. And if I'm connected to my yes, then I it's more about the activity or the resources that I have to put into whatever it is. Does that distinction make sense?
Yeah, and I can't help but think if anyone that may feel like a people pleaser took 5 seconds and took a question in and went, how does that feel in my body? Is that a hell yes or a I don't think that feels great? You know what I mean? And is that part of becoming more boundaried in a healthy way?
Absolutely. And that ability to check in with your body is also a huge step that most people pleasers, they don't even have access to their bodies in a lot of cases. And I'm
Okay, same
like,
with
emphasis on the reflexive yes, but like, it's such a reflex that you're just, you think you are a yes, right? It's like, no, but I'm fine doing all of these things. It's like, but are you? And so backing up a little bit to, like, developmental psychology in our formative years, this tends to happen when we grow up in an environment where we sort of end up feeling responsible for other people's feelings. And especially in our youth, we really need other people to be okay so that we can feel okay and safe. And so when our caregivers are, for any reason or manner, leaving us to feel responsible for their feelings. And I mean, it can be something as innocent as, I'm so proud of you, or as obvious as, oh, you're driving me nuts. But all of these things signal to us that, like, what I'm doing is making other people feel a certain way. And especially my caregivers, I need them to feel calm and happy with me so that I can feel safe and secure in the world. And then you just, like I said, you grow up with that as like a pattern. And so a lot of people talk about healing the people pleaser pattern by, they say things like, well, stop saying yes when you should be saying no, or when you know that you're a no, and it's not a real yes for you, but you say yes anyway. Like, stop doing that. And you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about, because you're, like I said, you're completely disconnected. And part of that journey is, let me back up a little bit. You think that you are protecting yourself. They say that you need to love yourself better and that it's self-care, being boundaried, right? You are actually trying to care for yourself by making other people okay, because that's how you feel safe. That's how your nervous system learned to feel safe, is to make sure that other people are okay. But that stems from an external orientation where you're actually dependent on other people being okay so that you can be okay. Does that make sense? I
Mm-hmm.
saw your eyebrows go up like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it is sort of a
Really
self-care.
unpredictable because now you're constantly working to make sure everyone else is happy, and then if they're not, then now it's affecting you instead of just taking care of you. You're could be taking care of a whole room of people. That's exhausting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. So the really like foundational work here is actually switching that external orientation and learning how to root your security within.
Mm,
And
okay.
then like something that you're probably more familiar with is like you know that you're okay if other people aren't thrilled about your decision, or like if you want to stop the car and get out, and like they might be upset and you're like, I don't care, I'm fine, I'm going to be fine. But you have to, people pleasers have to learn that. They have to, like I said, root their security within, and they have to do a lot of like reparenting work to build the self-trust with their inner child mostly, and their nervous system. And all of those years of people pleasing is a form of self-abandonment. We have been abandoning ourselves like the whole time because we never even really got in touch with our true selves because we were so busy from a young age making sure everyone else was okay. Like that was, how do I say it? It's hard to know which offers or requests you're a no to when you're already a reflexive yes to almost any requester. And having our sense of safety and security anchored outside of ourselves like that tends to make saying no unimaginable, if not extremely uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
we are, I'm having a brain fart. I had come up with a great way to explain it, but
Well, and collect your thoughts because as you're talking, I'm thinking about Chris Voss, which is one of my favorite authors and speakers. He wrote the Never Split the Difference, A
mhm,
Great Negotiation,
mhm.
and he loves no. He said you most people are afraid of no because it's like a shutdown, and I suppose even as a kid, no, you can't have that. No, don't do that. And so you're always like it's always seen and felt in a negative way. And so a no could probably feel really scary or as a abandonment, as a shutdown, as a dismiss, where it was interesting to read Chris Voss say in a negotiation, whether it's your personal life or in professional settings, a no actually is a door opener. Okay, good. Tell me more about that. And so it was like, oh, you could reframe what a no means instead of it being someone slamming the door in your face metaphorically. It's actually a door opener, which was like mind blowing to me. Um,
I love
so
that.
I don't. Yeah, it's interesting
His book is on
to see
my to read list, but I haven't read it yet.
get it.
Yeah.
What I also want to get into is the personal stuff. If you're willing to go there, you've been coaching for over a decade. It's very soon to be 2026, so over a decade. And I would say that a lot of people get into helping other people because they got through something and we're like, whew, okay, figure out how to do that. And now I want to go and show other people so they know too. And you can help in that respect. Share a bit about your story, whether it's way back when in 2015 or something more recent when you got into boundaries in particular that moved you into a space where you had to go through something to bring you to where you are now, and how comfortable you are talking about boundaries and helping other women um, set their own boundaries.
Yeah, sure. I've been a personal growth geek since I was 10. So, the
Really? How'd you know? Like a bunch of books, or like how did you?
so my dad was a physician, but he had his bachelor's degree in psychology, and he started teaching me. It's like as long as I can remember. He had me one summer. I did this like DIY self help program, and I don't know. I was curious about it. I was interested in it. So yeah,
That's awesome. That's
um,
awesome.
yeah. And so the coaching was just a natural expression of my interest in the field of psychology and personal development, and my desire to help and give and contribute and support people. um, I knew that I wanted to nurture self-love, but frankly a lot of what has evolved my focus in my coaching practice has been about marketing. And because most coaches can help almost anyone with almost anything, but we kind of have to pick a thing in order to like really connect with people in a way that they feel like they want us to be the one to help them with whatever problem they're going through. So the best way that we can really connect with people is by, focusing on a particular challenge in life. And
Mm-hmm.
it has to be framed in such a way that it's a challenge that people recognize as a challenge. And as coaches, we learn a lot about what goes on underneath the hood. And so we can see people's challenges where they might not be able to. And so in a lot of cases, like, self-love is the solution, but the lack of self-love isn't usually an identified problem that people are like, I need better self-love. Where do I find someone to help me with that? So I honed in a little bit on relationships, because like romantic relationships, because I, in my life, have found them to be really powerful tools for developing my self-love, because a lot of the issues that come up in relationships are just giant mirrors for where we're not really loving ourselves quite as well as we could. And as I, delve further into the relationship space, I started connecting a lot with especially women who were discovering that they had insecure attachment styles, like anxious or avoidant. And boundaries was just like a big part of that healing journey of becoming secure in love. And I found, like I said before, I found it really interesting to talk to that specific piece, because there's a lot of information about attachment theory, like that really blew up over like the last several years. And I find that it can get really easy to get bogged down in the weeds of that information in a way that I find it's helpful in the beginning to recognize yourself and maybe your partner or past partners in those frameworks, but then you can get too, like I said, bogged down in the weeds of it. And for me, it's easier to simplify and just be like, look, you're either secure and like love feels great, or you're insecure and love is scary. Like you want it and it's scary. And the solution, no matter what, is rooting your security within. And one of the benefits is healthy boundaries. And I found that a lot of people were trying to use boundaries as a healing tool instead of like something you heal into. So I say that the majority of boundaries show up as either flimsy fences or spiked walls. People like to say that some people don't have any boundaries, but when you view boundaries as just our resource limits, we all have them. It's just how we interact with them, how we communicate about them, how we implement them.
Say that again. I love that. We only have so much time in a day. We've only got so much energy in a day. We've got money, whatever it is. That another mind blowing moment. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So it's helpful to just acknowledge that we all have boundaries in the form of resource limits. And we can either go about it with flimsy fences, where we just like, let them go all over the place. And it's just, you're not really very functional in that sense. Or a lot of times the opposite extreme is spiked walls, and so this is actually a dynamic that can be framed in the anxious and avoidant terms, because people who have an anxious attachment style, when love gets serious, they get afraid. And so they seek closeness to find safety. And so they will grasp and pull and cling, and they want that closeness, and all of, the flimsy fences, like the fences are all flat and there's none. And I want to
Yeah,
become one with you. And, it's like really, it leans towards codependence, right?
and you would probably say yes to things that you normally would not agree with or be okay with. And you probably don't speak your mind, like abandon yourself when something comes up because you are like, whatever keeps me close to you, even if it means I'm going to abandon myself.
Yep.
What about the avoidant folks then? Because when you said that, what boundaries are their boundaries? Almost like you said, they're too spiky. You can't even get close to them. Then I mean,
Yeah.
they
Well,
have so many boundaries.
yeah. So the spiky part of the walls is kind of the extreme version, but When avoidant attached people, when the love gets serious and they get scared, they seek distance to feel safe. So anxious wants closeness to feel safe, avoidance want distance to feel safe, and they will either pull away or push away. And so sometimes usually when people are mean, they're not even really aware of it. It's not even, I mean, it's such a tiny, tiny fraction of people who are actually malicious, like consciously, maliciously wanting to do harm. Most of the time, people who are assholes are just like, especially in those closer relationships, it's just a coping mechanism. It's a defensive strategy. And they're like, I need distance. And so I'm just going to wound you with words and like say mean things so that you go away from me. Cause I'm in this, fight,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like fight or flight is a very, more of that type of protective, whereas the anxious style is a little bit more like freeze
And
or
I,
fawn.
I can have compassion for both,
Mm-hmm.
being more of the anxiously attached. I'm very familiar with the flimsy fences. And question then, if you are more anxiously attached and with someone who is more avoidantly attached, is there a point where, I mean, I can be compassionate and understanding and be like, this is my partner's way of protecting himself. And then there's a point where it's like, and I can't do this anymore. Like
Yep.
I can't constantly be pushed away because you have some boundary issues. Is
Yep.
that a yes or a no? I'm assuming that there's a point where it no longer becomes healthy for either partner.
So I'm really big on alignment. I feel
Okay.
like non-judgment is a really important part of personal development because judgment is an operating system. Just like love or faith or fear, judgment is an operating system in our mind. And if we're judging others, we're judging ourselves.
Mm.
If we're judging ourselves, we're judging others. Like it's just, or you can love and accept everyone, including yourself. And
Hmm.
our brains are always going to put things in boxes. There's judging, can I make this left turn? There's judging, like with a robe and gavel, like, is this thing in accordance with the laws that is written? We're always judging things. But those moral judgments where, is this good or evil? That type of stuff, I feel like just gets us in trouble because then it's somewhere, if we're running that operating system, we're going to be judging and shaming ourselves. And I feel like shame is the most worthlessly debilitating emotion that there is. Guilt is like, oh, I did something wrong. Shame is I am wrong / bad / horrible / unworthy. So instead, it's like I love retasking the brain. Things that it's already gonna do or that it's even good at. It's like, hey, let's just take that activity and let me give you a different set of tools, right? So that those box sets, instead of good and bad, let's go aligned and misaligned. And that's not just a label replacement. It doesn't mean aligned is good and misaligned is bad. It's just if something is aligned with my values and goals, of course I'm going to do it. If something's
Hmm.
not aligned with my values and goals, like if I determine that this thing is misaligned with my values and goals, like that's some information that is probably going to lead me to not pursue it. Not because it's bad, it's just not aligned. So when it comes to relationships, if you find that the way that this person deals with conflict or triggers or boundaries is not really aligned with what you need and how you want to show up and participate in a relationship, then maybe it's not a good fit.
And I like what you said about it's not good or bad. And I really feel like that too. And restoring that when you I don't know how many past relationships you have. I hadn't had a lot of serious ones, and I've come in and out of different people's lives. And I can look at it now and say, he wasn't a bad person. I wasn't a bad person. It just wasn't a match. And that is okay. Neither of us are wrong for that. And neither of us are a bad person. It just wasn't a match. It's a really nice way to, like you said, not put shame or guilt on either party.
Sometimes I get flack because my words can be construed as like abuser apologizing. And I'm
What do
like,
you mean? Same one.
So I might say, like, hey, let's not demonize or vilify this person who is emotionally abusing you. Let's just leave. And it's like, no, but like, the ego wants to stay involved and win and be right and be somehow vindicated, and it's just like, how about he's just not a safe person to be around? Like, we don't vilify or demonize bears or lions. Like, have you ever seen a wild predator take down and eat another animal alive? Like, it's a pretty vicious thing to do, right? But we don't vilify
Mother
them.
Nature is wild.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they're evil. They're just doing what they're doing. And we're animals too. We're just, hairless apes that got too smart for our own good. And we invented morality and judgment, and it helps us socially stick around and reproduce at some level. Like, it's that simple. And the thing is a person who has coping mechanisms that become abusive in a relationship is kind of like a bear. Like, you just don't get too close to it. But it doesn't mean that they're a horrible person. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's actually really nice.
And
It's a nice way.
the reason that I say that isn't for their benefit. It's for ours, because like I said, judgment is an operating system. And I have sat with a particular friend of mine through countless meltdowns of hers. She's very codependent. She's in Codependence Anonymous. She's doing the work, but and this was a few years ago, but through multiple relationships, she would go through these meltdowns where he's being horrible. I feel like I'm being used. I'm like, where are your boundaries? And he said this and that, but then did this and that. I'm like, he's been showing you the whole time who he is, and you just keep choosing to like ignore it. And then she's like, well, then I'm a horrible person. How am I so dumb? And da-da-da. I'm like, neither of you guys are horrible people. And, it's just, the brain does kind of work with that all or nothing operating system. And so if she's judging and looking for someone to blame and someone to be wrong, it's either got to be him or her. And I'm just like, let's not do that. He's just not a good fit for you. He's demonstrated to you that he's not going to show up the way that you want. You are a beautiful, wonderful human. And it doesn't mean you're unworthy of love because he's not showing up for you. You guys are just misaligned. But it's so hard. It's easy to get mad at someone and blame them and run away and it's all their fault, but you're pretty likely to just end up in a similar dynamic with the next person, unless you just decide to start looking for what feels aligned with your values and goals and not just what feels good in the moment.
With that example you gave, what is a way, let's say both humans are trying to be healthier and they want to work on it and figure out how to be healthier together. What would be a boundary that she could set? How would she say it? Because I think some folks, if they don't know how to properly communicate and or set boundaries, they just lash out and why are you such a jerk? And, you're too sensitive and like, or whatever it is. How could two people set a boundary? What does that look like? What does it sound like? Do you have a couple examples so someone could go, yikes, I've seen myself in this situation or a pattern that I've had in the past. How do I make sure I don't repeat that?
First of all, the way you just framed that was that two people who are willing to work on it is huge, because
That's the first step, right?
well, yeah, exactly. Because most dysfunctional relationships is when 0 or 1 people are trying to take accountability and do the work to repair from conflicts. And, I say personal responsibility plus interpersonal accountability equals relational synergy. And again, most relationships, either neither of them have that awareness or there's only one of them trying to do the work. But if you are in a relationship where both people are like, let's learn how to make this work. I want to show up. Yeah, I'm willing to, I'm trying to make the repairs happen and things like that. Like, you probably got a lot going for you. In terms of communicating boundaries, the first, like, zooming out a little bit in terms of like, what's that word? Intimacy. a really handy, easy, anyone can use today tool for stating a boundary. Especially, this is a wonderful resource for recovering people pleasers who feel so terrified to say no, is just follow your no with a yes. I'm not available for that, but I am available for this. And by the way, don't make the yes just another thing that's not aligned for you or within your capacity. Like, make it a true yes. But that way, you're still staying in connection with the other person, and it doesn't feel like you're personally rejecting them, And it doesn't have to be like a no or F you. It's just like, hey, that doesn't work. But, and the alternative can also just be like, but thank you so much for asking, or, but I really appreciate you. It just can be like showing up for them or acknowledging them. In more intimate relationships, however, I think it's really helpful to use a framework that I call the XYZ frame. And basically, I guess I'm going to zoom out a little bit more too and just say, remind people that our boundaries are our responsibility. Boundaries are not the same thing as needs. They're both super valid and important. But when we communicate about needs, we need something from someone else. And so we're going to make a request. And it shouldn't be a demand. If you're making a demand, like, it's just, you're going to end up with some resistance. But if you say, hey, here's something I need, here's a way you could help me meet that need. What are your needs in this situation? How can we collaborate so that all of our needs can get met? Nonviolent communication is a great strategy for all of that. Boundaries, on the other hand, boundaries don't require anything from anyone else because, again, they're just our resource limits. So when we communicate about them in close relationships, it's really just a gift of information about cause and effect. So when X happens, I feel Y. And so to care for myself, I will do Z. When I receive harsh criticism, I feel shame. And so to care for myself, when this happens, I will step away from the conversation. And then your job is to actually do that consistently, to follow up on what you have identified as your needs for self-care. Does that kind of answer your question?
Absolutely. Now I'm thinking about you and your personal relationships when you started to set boundaries. When did you realize you needed to start setting boundaries? And then realizing what that meant, and what did it feel like to start doing that for yourself?
Well, interestingly, I think we have relationships with boundaries. We have different relationships with boundaries in different types of relationships. Like, all the women I talk to, they'll say, like, I'm great with boundaries at work, and even with friendships and even romance, but it's with my mom. It's just with my mom that's the hard thing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Because as I was giving you my example, I have really good boundaries about a lot of things. Like, even the other night, I went out to dinner and somebody's like, you want to go over here and get drinks after? I said, I don't. And he goes, it'll be fun. And I said, you know what sounds fun? Going home and going to bed. It was really great to meet you. It was just very easy to just do what I needed
Yeah.
and not worry about how that other person felt.
Yeah.
And I have found in intimate relationships, my boundaries are floppy, whatever you called that fence. That's me. I would sometimes just get quiet and not say anything, even though I knew something didn't feel good or didn't feel right for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And so anyway, yes, I could totally understand where different people, different boundary capabilities.
Yep, exactly. And those different relational dynamics, like, it's kind of like there's different stakes,
Yeah. So where did you struggle then, and how did you work on that for yourself, and what did that feel like?
I find that like, my parents, I think, were the first people I started setting boundaries with, and not very difficultly. Friends, in retrospect, I can see that I was very much doing like, there's an aspect of people pleasing that I call chameleoning or contorting, to like fit into whatever people wanted or needed. And I would try and be a million things to a million people, and not necessarily in like over giving, but like, sure, I can be into that, or yeah, that sounds like fun, or, I can, be interested and participate in all kinds of different things. I didn't really have like a clear brand or, like, lane that was mine.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it's been romantic relationships for me that has definitely been the hardest one. And it was almost a progression through my serious relationships that like the boundaries kind of got bigger and more problematic, like my lack of boundaries, my flimsy fences.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
my last relationship was the biggest doozy. I still call it my crucible. It was very challenging. And very early on, I actually recognized that it's like I was going to bow out. And then I was like, wait a second, there's a pattern here. I was like, all right, coach, I'm going back in. Like, let's see what I can learn here, because obviously I've got some relationship issues and I'm not going to be able to solve them all by myself. Like, yeah, we can do the inner work, but I needed the relationship to like trigger the things, to bring them up, to see them and work on them. And man, I grew, I learned more about myself and grew more in those 7 years than probably my whole life leading up to that. One of the big things I learned was boundaries, and like in a deeper level. And he was definitely someone who brought what could be called an abusive element to the relationship. But I also look back on that relationship as like three, four, maybe even five different like relationships in one, because there were these really different phases. You know, there was the early dating phase, and then there was this, like, there was a break and we came back together, and then there was this different dynamic for a little while. And then we lived together and that was horrible. And then there was like, we started a nonprofit together. And anyway, things got so bad that then I had to really start dissolving the relationship. But we had shared friends, we had that nonprofit, we had some other projects together. And because he could be kind of volatile, I really didn't want him to blow things up so bad that even me, who's quite forgiving, wouldn't be able to recover from. You know, I was like, I really want to do this delicately, because I have always been really committed to being compassionate, and I wanted to do it with integrity. And while everyone around me was, you know, had criticisms of him, I saw that he was, you know, worthy of love, and I tried everything. I threw everything in the kitchen sink at the relationship until I had exhausted everything within my power and felt like, okay, there's really nothing to be
Your
saved here.
resources.
Yeah, yeah,
There goes your resources.
yeah, exactly. And so once I felt like I really had to be a no to the whole relationship. There was nothing more that could be, you know, I tried implementing boundaries within the relationship, but it didn't solve the overall problem, because he wasn't really showing up for repairs. That's what I mentioned before, is a
Yeah.
really important thing.
Yep.
So I actually spent about a year single-handedly consciously uncoupling us. It was like a stepwise process, and the very last thread to be cut, you know, was, you know, this romantic relationship can't go on. I had already moved out. You know, I had to get a job because it was pandemic. It wasn't working for a little while. Got a job, got my own place. We kept fighting. I took sex off the table, and we were still fighting. And I was like, okay, the romance, if we want to save everything else that we have, the romance has to be gone. And then there was one last fight about that. And I caught myself defending myself. And then I was like, you know what? And I meant this very sincerely. I said, if you need me to be the villain, that's okay. Like, if that makes it easier for you, because I do actually love you, that's fine. Whatever. And that softened him, totally disarmed him. And he was like, I love you too. And that was just the end of that. And then we transitioned into friendship, and we were able to retain the friendship, and yeah, we still hang out about every month or two. And it's been a couple
Good
of years.
for you. Consciously uncoupling. That's awesome.
Single-handedly, no less. It is difficult when you're the only one on board with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I work with women that are rebuilding after the breakup, and they're like, now what? You know, like, okay, what do I want in this next chapter? Again, a theme that comes up over and over is the lack of prioritizing themselves and the people pleasing. And this is the new era of what do I want? What do I want this next chapter to look like and feel like? How do you see boundaries being part of that? And what do you see with women as the difficult part when they're starting to learn how to actually set boundaries? What is difficult for them?
So, first of all, to anyone who's like considering a breakup or in the midst of a breakup and having a really hard time with it because there is love, one of the most important things that I learned is that, like, I always wanted to believe that love is unconditional. And I think that that's part of the reason, especially people pleasers or anxious attached people, to like, there's something in there that keeps us in the relationship because we see the 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 love worthiness, the worthiness of the other person. You know, they deserve to be loved too. And so we feel like we can't leave them. And I think that there's this subconscious misconception in our culture, largely perpetuated by movies or maybe just reflected by them. But this idea that love equates to relationships, that if you end the relationship, you don't love them. And my whole thing is you can love them and leave them. Love is unconditional. Otherwise, we're not talking about the same thing, right? Love, that beautiful force in the energetic force in the universe. Love is unconditional. Relationships are not. We absolutely should have conditions on our relationships. And that is exactly what boundaries are for.
That is a quote right there, because you're absolutely right. It took me a long time to believe or realize that.
Mm-hmm.
As for me, chemistry junkie,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And someone I was in a relationship with, if I saw him right now, I'd probably start crying because I love
Mm.
him that much.
Yeah.
I that chemistry probably wouldn't be gone.
Yep.
I saw a video years ago, or I saw a video of this couple. They had dated like 30 years prior or something, and they were just, and then she was doing this art installation, and she, stone faced, would just sit at this table, and people would come through and sit across from the table from her, sit as long as they wanted, and then leave. And she, zero reaction. Like whatever this art thing was, it was her just being completely emotionless and just sitting there and staring at people. And then as they moved through, a gentleman she hadn't seen in 30 years sat down, and immediately both of them started crying. And it was just like they knew that they still loved each other, even if they weren't together. And I thought, oh, that would be me if I
Mm.
saw him, because I would lose it. And like you said, it wasn't that we didn't love each other, it just wasn't an alignment of what we wanted out of a relationship. And I was like, but I thought so. Yes, you go ahead and say that again. And then, like I said,
Yeah. Next
tell the
steps.
tell the woman listening then what that means to start setting boundaries and how it might feel. And even though it doesn't feel great, why to keep going.
Absolutely. Love is unconditional. Relationships are not. And that's what boundaries are for. And one of the most powerful ways that we can be love is acceptance. And that's what really helped me transition out of that relationship, was when I really started, like, first I started accepting him. Like, he actually kind of delicately, tactfully invited me early on to maybe just because I was trying to change him. And he was like, I've shown you who I am. I'm not asking you to change. And so it was just kind of like an invitation to maybe accept him as he was. And so that I took on that challenge. I was like, okay, I will accept you as you are. It took me 7 years to accept me as I was also. And really actually fully accept him as he was too, because I was still like, well, maybe like things will change, or maybe I can just get him to change in different ways, or maybe if I change, mostly it was maybe if I change how I show up. And the thing is, we were always misaligned, but I kept trying to pull him or me out of alignment so that we could stay together. And once I really accepted him as he was and me as I was, and what he, like, what his capacity was for showing up in relationship, for communicating, for giving, for repairing or not, and what my capacity was, what my needs were, how I really needed someone to show up for me, and all of those things. And I was like, it finally, like once I really accepted him and really accepted me, is when I saw the misalignment. And that's when I was like, staying together is doing more harm than good, because we're pulling each other out of alignment to do it. So that's also really important to help understand. It was more loving to leave than to stay together. On the other side of it, though, so I've mentioned flimsy fences and spiked walls. What I teach is selective gates. And so we talked about the flimsy fences being basically saying yes too often, and spiked walls are essentially saying no too harshly. Selective gates are where we say no without disconnecting, like maybe following it with a yes. And if, like, essentially we draw our boundaries around behaviors instead of people. And that kind of comes back to that like non-judgment thing. It's like, you're essentially giving people the keys to accessing you through the gates that you've installed. Like, hey, this is how I'm willing to engage. If you can show up this way, if you can come around and come in through this gate, then we can be cool. And if you can't, no worries. The gate's always here. You know where to find me, and then you don't have to throw up the walls or slam doors. Very rarely do you actually have to draw a boundary around a whole person, but that does sometimes happen. Because you can have a boundary around a certain type of behavior and you can communicate that enough times. And if they're just not willing or able to like adjust, then you just kind of have to, like, I think it's normal and healthy and advisable to make some concessions for like a learning curve. Like, people can make the mistakes a few times, but you might have another boundary around like, how many times is that? Like, how many, okay, I feel like this is enough. I feel like you're really just not. Capacity is a huge indicator of boundaries. And people, especially, like, we often aren't aware of all of our boundaries, but you can see people's capacity by how they show up. We usually do the best that we can, right? And if they're just not bringing it, then that's the capacity. And respecting boundaries is not just about our boundaries, but respecting other people's boundaries. And so when you see where their capacity is, then again, love is acceptance, and you just adjust your relationship to them or their role in your life. Instead of trying to change people, we change dynamics. Healing into boundaries and learning how to install selective gates, I've developed the gates method to really help with that process. And it's handy on the micro and the macro. So like in a given moment, these steps are really helpful, but also like the whole healing journey. So the first step, it's an acronym. GATES stands for ground, assess, trust, express, and steward. So the very first step is to ground in your body. And again, a lot of people pleasers are completely disconnected from their body. So that's a whole journey. If you are not embodied, start there. Find a somatics coach, look up some somatic or embodiment meditations online, start learning how to feel your body, because, we talk about good vibes or bad vibes. Like, those are vibrational frequencies that are felt in the body. So we have to be able to feel our body, to feel how we're aligning with another person. And one of the biggest benefits when it comes to boundaries of being embodied is learning how to discern the difference between safe and unsafe discomfort. And I feel like you can get pretty far cognitively with that, but to really nail it, you got to get the body involved. And we have a really strong tendency to lean into unsafe discomfort because it's familiar, and shy away from safe discomfort because it's unfamiliar. So it's tricky, and it really is important to be able to have that discernment. So grounding in your body and your values is really the foundational first step. And then the next step is to assess your capacity and your true yes. So part of that journey is, again, that sort of reparenting, getting in touch with your inner child, learning what your true yes is outside of what other people need, what lights you up, what feels aligned with your values and goals and limits. And doing that assessment. What are my limits? What are my resources? How much money is in the bank today? How much time do I really have on my calendar this week? How much energy do I really have right now? Like, do that quick assessment before you answer. And by the way, another really handy boundary tool is, I'm not sure, let me get back to you.
That's a good one. No commitment, just you're open and you're not giving a definite answer.
Yeah, give yourself time to check in with yourself, especially while you're still learning how to do that. And then trust in the other's ability to manage. So sometimes we say yes to things that weren't even asked of us. We jump in to rescue people, right? But we got to trust that, that they're sovereign, powerful, divine beings that can handle life or learn or figure it out. Or, maybe someone asks you for something and you're like, oh my gosh, I really can't. They're like, no worries, I can ask someone else, because you're not their only resource.
And their feelings are not your responsibility.
Say what?
I mean,
yeah.
Yes.
So we've grounded, we've assessed, we're trusting, and then we express that no. And following it with a yes is a really great way to do that. So you want to express your no without disconnecting. Stay in connection with the person. Like, no, I'm not available for that. What else you got? I'm not a no to you. I'm not down for that.
Or just no. And I love that you asked me. Maybe another time.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel special that you asked me that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then S is for steward your precious resources. And that's kind of that ongoing maintenance, like I talked about before. Like, if you know that harsh criticism makes you feel shame and you need to walk away from those conversations, do that every time. Mm-hmm. And just, I found it really, really helpful when I started seeing boundaries as our resource limits. At first, I had to work through this whole scarcity mindset thing and feeling like I was limiting myself by accepting that I had limits, until I realized that diamonds and gold are valuable because they're a finite resource. And I was like, oh, well, then all of my finite resources are like these precious jewels that I'm this noble steward of managing them. And then you can really start to apply the oxygen mask rule. And this gets back to your question too, about where it gets really scary on the other side of things. I don't want, my whole thing is empowering compassion. I don't want people to sacrifice those big hearts, but let that fuel you. You have to take care of yourself so that you can show up resourced for the people and projects that you care most about.
You are a wealth of knowledge. Once I get you going, I just want to keep going. Can you please, I think, what was it that the setting boundaries that feel good? Can you tell the wonderful woman who's listening right now where she can find you, follow, find, and I'm assuming you have a free gift of some sort if she gets on your email list. So please do share.
Absolutely. I am on socials at Love Coach Mariya. Again, that's Mariya. And if you go to boundariesthatfeelgood.com, you can download my free gift that is just sort of a jump start for making boundaries a lot easier.
I like that. Did you come up with the motto of life? Mine, like I said, mine is, if you don't try, you don't know. Do you have one that you sort of moves you through this life?
I mean, honestly, empower your compassion. And that's the name of my podcast.
Okay, well, we got podcasts, we got social media. I think anyone that wants to learn more about attachment theory, boundaries, you are the gal. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Your Unapologetic Life. If this podcast felt like a truth bomb, share it with another woman you love. Make sure you're following the show, and please rate and review. It really helps. Want weekly motivation in your inbox? Tap the link in the show notes to join my email list and instantly unlock your post-breakup pump-up video. And if you're thinking, I want Morgan to be my coach, click the discovery call link in the show notes, and let's talk about how perfect my coaching program could be for you right now.